So there's really four big buckets that we can drop these practice transitions into. Think of it kind of like a grid. We can sell to a private veterinarian or a group of private veterinarians, or we can sell to a private equity group, a corporate, if you will. Both of those on the y-axis there have two options. We can sell all of the practice, or we can sell a percentage of the practice. And so kind of summarize, we can sell a percentage of the practice to a private individual, or we can sell all of the practice to a private individual. We can sell part of the practice to a corporate group. And that's the same partnership that we were talking about above, but the corporates like to call it a joint venture or a JV. And so this is, kind of one of our definitions. They'll use the word JV instead of partnership, or we can sell all of the practice to a corporate or private equity group.
That is Dr. Lance Roasa, and he's joined by Dr. Bree Montana. Both are veterinarians, practice owners, and so much more. And this is the VIN Foundation's Veterinary Pulse podcast, and the second installment of the Futures So Bright series on the ins and outs of selling a veterinary practice. I'm Jordan benShea, VIN Foundation's Executive Director. Join me and our co-host and VIN Foundation board member, Dr. Matt Holland, as we talk with veterinary colleagues about critical topics and share stories. Stories that connect us as humans, as animals, as a veterinary community. This podcast is made possible by individuals like you who donate to the VIN Foundation. Thank you. Please check the episode notes for bios, links, and information mentioned. Welcome back, Bree and Lance. Thanks for being here. We are excited to kick off another episode of the Futures So Bright series, the ins and outs of selling a veterinary practice. Hey, Bree. Hey, Lance.
Hey, Jordan. It's so good to be here with both of you.
Hello. Great to hear you.
So in this episode, we are going to be discussing the different types of practice sales. As many of you listeners know, Dr. Bree Montana is our team lead for our Vets for Vets confidential support group and a practice owner. And Dr. Lance Roasa is joining us to help shed some light in his areas of expertise, which are quite vast, including being a veterinarian, an attorney, a practice owner, and multiple other things. So I kind of want to tie back to, in our first kickoff episode, Lance ended us with giving Bree some homework. And that homework was, as a practice owner, one of the things he suggests starting with is really defining and figuring out what your why is, right? Why do I want to sell this practice? And so, let's just start first and foremost. Bree, how did your homework assignment go?
Oh, man, homework. You think that you'd be done with homework after all that school, but no, there's more. Life has homework right there for you. So my homework's gone pretty well. I've been, for those of us that are in a similar stage to where I am in life, where you've owned your practice. I've been practicing for 30 years and I've owned my practice for 20 years, and I'm ready to sort of open up for a different kind of adventure. And so I've been spending a lot of time thinking about how much practice do I want to do? What do I want my life to look like in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years? And all of this is spiced with that special spice that comes from life, that being that my husband has a very strange and aggressive form of cancer that 3 other people have. So it's all kind of coming together in a way that I could see it as something that's being done to me, but I'd rather grab the reins and really jump on and have it be something that I'm doing to make my life go in a direction that makes more sense for me. So for my why right now, and just ask me in 5 minutes, it'll be different. My why for right now is that I need to have more latitude and more freedom in my life. I love being an owner. I love, I wanted a bear hugger, so I bought a bear hugger, and when I worked for somebody else, it was never that way. When I wanted an ultrasound, there was never any money for an ultrasound. And I'm on my second one now, that's new and and beautiful. And so that's what I love about practice ownership. But practice ownership also comes with a 365-day-a-year obligation to be kind of bonded to whatever's going on at the practice. And I really need more freedom from that. So I want to keep learning and growing and, practicing excellent medicine, but I want to do it on a scaled back format, I guess. I want to do it in a way that allows me more freedom to be there when Bill needs me, when he needs to go travel and have some fun with me, when we have the opportunity to enjoy living in North Lake Tahoe and being outside. I want to be able to do that. So my why is more about I'm pivoting into a lifestyle that's going to allow me more freedom. And I'm really wanting to see this as an adventure and something that I'm creating, just like I've created, my whole career really, as opposed to something that life's done to me. So that's going to be my point of view. And I want to really take this opportunity, because who gets the opportunity to speak with Lance, somebody who's so knowledgeable and has done so many different kinds of things with his career, with his veterinary license, with his law license, and with his sort of background, who gets the opportunity to work with somebody like that and say, what are all the different ways that I can move my practice forward and move my career forward in a way that allows me to have more freedom and less business responsibility.
Right. And I think, that just to touch on that a minute, I think that we hear with the Vets for Vets program and a lot, just how colleagues are yearning for that more freedom and the ability to kind of take more control over their life and to, as you said, feel like I'm living my life versus life living me. Right. I think that's a common thing that we hear in the veterinary profession. I think it's a common thing we hear across the board in all different types of professions. And especially, I think one of the blessings out of COVID, if there are any, are people are taking stock in their life, right? People are taking stock in what's important to them and what do they value and where do they want to put their time and effort. Right. So I think that this podcast series is very helpful for that as well. So I think great job on your homework. I would give you an A+. Lance, what grade does she get?
Great job. Very, very insightful, very thoughtful. And yeah, thank you for the kind words as well. So, but a very well thought out thing. I know, and I hate to hear that life has dished you some surprises, and the timing is also very interesting with what's going on in our industry as well. As far as the number of practices that are being sold, the number of, private equity groups and corporations coming into the practice. And so it's a very interesting time, both in your life, Bree, and then also in the industry as well. So it's funny how that came together. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I really, kind of peeled out of what you said is, you're really looking for that desire to scale back. And I'm hoping you kind of dug in on that. What does that mean? What is scale? How much are we talking as far as scaling back? And what does that mean to you? And I think the fact that you're stopping and saying, what does let me live my life, not the other way around. But what does that mean on a very granular level, on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, when you are talking about scaling back?
Yeah, that's like a really difficult to answer question, I think, for not just for me, but for so many of us. Because one day I'm in the trenches and I'm just having things are going quickly and things are interesting and cases are cool and I'm just really all about it and things are great. And then the next day, maybe somebody gives notice at work. I'm like, well, I'm just done. I just don't want this anymore. And so it's kind of it's a work in progress, what I want things to look like. And I think that for so much of my career, like so many of us, I worked when I went to school, and I was always working full time and going to school because I was, paying for school. And then I was practicing, and then I'm practicing and raising my daughter, and then I'm practicing and doing all these other things. And so I've never had those two beats together to think about things. And so I'm really trying to carve out some time to think about things. And I encourage all of us that are thinking about their transition to the next step is to carve out that time to kind of feel like what it would be like for them. One of the things I know for sure is that if I get the freedom of time to not have to work, I know that I will want to work at some level. I'm not going to. I just am not the kind of person that's not going to do anything. I know I'll continue with my vets for vet stuff. And I suspect that I'll probably want to continue to practice advanced dentistry. That's one of the things that's been my field of interest lately, last few years. And so I'm probably going to go more in the direction of specializing on that and provide that to the practice once I've sold it.
Interesting. So that's great to hear that you're not, planning on leaving practice completely, that they're, from hearing you talk too, it really sounds like you really do love practice. You love many components of practice. You just don't love all the stuff that comes with practice. The one example that you gave was, an employee issue. And obviously, that is the number one driver of gray hairs among veterinarians is managing employees and dealing with the team on a daily basis.
Yeah, team building. So I kind of see things in separate pots in practice management. I have the science and medicine aspect of it. There's a business aspect of it, and then there's a team building aspect of it. And I really love team building, and I really love practice. I'm not really that cool with the business management stuff. I don't really care about any of that. As long as there's money in my checkbook at the end of each month, then I'm satisfied, which is really, I'm so embarrassing, but true. I'm just not, I don't understand any of that aspect of practice management. And I've only been doing it 20 years. So of course I don't understand it yet. But yeah, I love medicine. I love being a veterinarian. I love practicing medicine, but right now it's too much for me. So for me now, I need to get, part of my big why is I need to get unhooked from some of the carriage that I'm pulling. I can't be pulling that whole cart. I need to have more freedom to come and go a little bit more so that I can be more in my personal life when I need to be.
I hear you. In the conversation we're having is not an academic conversation. It really has a lot to do with what your options are. And so as you start to, really elicit what you want and what are the things that your life needs at this point in time, what do you enjoy, in practice, from day to day, that really drives what your options are and what you can do, with your practice. The beautiful thing is you do have a practice to sell, and practices are very, valuable assets, but exactly how you effectuate that sell to who or to whom and how much of the practice, really drives on what you want to look at after you sell the practice or a portion of it. And I think that's what we really need to spend some time talking about today are what are those options and which of those options fit into your needs and your wants.
Right. Yeah. I see today as sort of like a blue sky brainstorming period wherein we can talk about all the different ways of transitioning from being a solo or, a practice owner where I'm the practice owner, I own everything myself, and maybe I have a bunch of associates, which I don't, but I would love. Transitioning from being that person that's responsible for all aspects of the practice to being someone that's perhaps partially responsible or somebody that has completely divested the practice, whether that be to a corporate entity or to a veterinarian who wants to own a practice and take the reins, or maybe to a group of veterinarians. I mean, Lance, this is where I'm turning to you to say, kind of give us a feel for all the different ways we can go.
Well, you really nailed it. And you really pointed it out that there's really, our first kind of why in the road or fork in the road is how much of the practice to sell. And so in this is one of the bigger questions that selling veterinarians face and my clients face. Do I sell 100% of the practice or do I sell a certain percentage of the practice? If I'm going to sell a certain percentage of the practice, how much of that practice do I sell? And it really, I don't want to say it's regardless of the buyer, but then breaking down from there, we really have another fork in the road. Is do we sell to a private veterinarian, another practicing veterinarian, or as you mentioned, and I love that mention, a group of veterinarians, or do we sell to a corporate entity? Both of the options, selling 100% or a partial sell, are both available to both private practice cells or private veterinarian cells and also to the corporate side. So we really have four large buckets, more or less, that these practice transactions, transitions fall into. And, and a lot of folks make the decision on the flip side first, and they'll say, I want to sell to a corporate, or I want to sell to a private, entity, and then make the second decision, 100% of the practice or a percentage of the practice after that. I think that we really need to make that decision in reverse and say, do I want to sell all the practice or a part of the practice? Because it's going to change the way that you ultimately market the practice, the way you talk to those buyers, and the way you set yourself up for the sell as well.
Yeah, my Barbie's dream practice fantasy would be that I and two other veterinarians would own the practice together. So we would each have, 33% or a 30-40-30 split. So that there's lots of people that can kind of add energy to the practice and help lift up and carry the practice, and also carry the management duties. I don't know how to make something like that happen, but that's been what, that's my dream beach house situation.
It's funny that you say that, because some of the most successful practices that I've been a part of, that I've worked with and consulted with, and some of the most successful transactions that I've set up were exactly that, where we have one or two veterinarians or more, come into a partnership, and that's exactly what you're describing. So, and even more so, an even partnership, where we can spread out that management, we can spread out that time commitment at the practice. And it is and when done right, it is extremely successful. I would argue that some of the most successful practices in veterinary medicine are structured on that partnership model.
The nice thing about that is that it feels like the practice can continue on, and new energy can be added into the practice in 5 or 10 years when they want to bring another associate in to the ownership management group. And then that's an easy transition for the person who's transitioning out.
Yes. And I'll tell you this, that's, if we look at other professions, and, and on the attorney side, I've had a chance to look at and study law firms. Same thing on, other professional firms, be it accounting firms or engineering firms. That's the model that they use, regularly in other professions, where the practice is intentionally divided into partners, and people work until they, quote unquote, make partner. And obviously they work after partnership as well. As they near retirement, they cycle off partnership. New individuals come in and take those partnerships, and the life of the business, the life of the firm, the life of the practice continues on. And so this model is not something that's just successful in veterinary medicine. It's successful in other professions as well. So, and I think one of the things we should do today is really look at the pros and cons of each of these, advantages and disadvantages of all of these models. That's a real advantage. And to that partner that is giving up their shares, that is selling part of the partnership. At first glance, hey, I'm selling something that's very valuable. I only have, let's say 30 or 40% now. I'm only going to take 30 or 40% of the profits. But the advantage is you have what Bree's just described is, you have the ability to take vacations and step away from the practice and know someone is there that's going to care for that practice in the same way that you did as an owner. The hard part, let's talk about some disadvantages here. The disadvantage is obviously working within a partnership. Mm-hmm. Partnerships are difficult. Yep. For those of us that are married, probably know that they just certainly have ups and downs. An old adage in the law is partnerships are ships that don't sail. And so that's there are plenty of partnerships that have gone sour as well. So this is one of those things where selecting that partner, bringing that partner on, and then also working with that partnership takes active work. So it takes a different set of work. It's right. The work doesn't go away. It takes a different set of skills, of emotional intelligence, communication skills, and just overall work to keep that partnership healthy. Partnerships that aren't taken care of, that aren't grown and developed and massaged, they fall apart, and they can fall apart in a very spectacular fashion as well. So, there are certainly pros and cons to the partnership model. Personally, I am a big fan of partnerships. I'm still in successful partnerships, but I know the work that's involved in making sure that those partnerships remain successful.
Lance, are there businesses that are able to kind of help shepherd us through that kind of relationship, help us find people to buy into our practice? I mean, how is that done? I feel here I am. I'm up in North Lake Tahoe, and I've got 15 feet of snow all around me. I don't really feel like I can go out and find somebody today. Who does it? Who do we turn to?
Well, I'm sure that there are consultants, and there's certainly practice brokers that do those things. The traditional way that this is done, and I'm sure this is it's there that those partners are brought on as associates, and ultimately they make partner. And this is done over a series of years. Bree, given your set of life circumstances, that time is, that time to hire an associate, which is obviously difficult in the year 2022, is going to be difficult. And then grooming that person up to partner is going to be, difficult as well. So, you may actually decide to skip, if you do go this route, skip that associate step and just advertise, hey, I'm looking to sell a portion of the practice. Now, that is not very common in veterinary medicine, where somebody joins just as partner immediately. Usually there's a bit of a vetting stage, if you will,
a dating stage
where we want to make sure that we have the right individual before we make them into partner. So at the very, very least, we want to find someone. I'll advise you to find someone that we have excellent references on, that we know what they want to do. Now, I'll say this, that many, this is a common misconception. And I have the opportunity to work with a lot of veterinary students and a lot of recent graduates. They want to buy practices. They want to buy parts of practices. These percentages, these partnerships are very enticing to them, because they're not necessarily, and I'm talking in broad strokes here, generalities, they're not necessarily ready to buy the entire practice, 100% of it, but they feel very comfortable buying, a third of it or 20% of it, with the opportunity to buy more in the future.
And thinking back to in my early career before I bought my practice, I would have been so stoked to be able to buy into a practice and have a little say into what's going on. I mean, that's one of the most frustrating things about being an associate, is that you don't have a voice. You can help to train your team members, your veterinary assistants, and your technicians to the things that you want them to do. Here's how I like my ultrasound to be set up, and blah, blah, blah. But that's where your power ends. You don't get to make key decisions, and being a purchased in partner allows you to have a say in the direction the practice grows in.
Yes. And and a cut of the profits as well,
huge.
And something that's valuable at the end of your career, during your career. And so, you're working into paying for a very valuable asset. So, to me, the partnership model is a very, very good thing for all people involved, with that one major disadvantage is we've got to communicate effectively, and we've got to be stewards of that partnership, and really, work to grow and develop the relationship.
Yeah, you really need to be a grown-up who's willing to play nicely in the sandbox. The positive, the additional sort of unwritten upside to having colleagues like that, though, is the partnership itself is a benefit. It's so sustaining to our profession to be able to have somebody with whom you can share collegial challenges and successes, with whom you can discuss cases and discuss business. To have a partner, it's just as beneficial as having a really good marriage.
Absolutely, precisely. And so, a lot of folks will ask me, well, why should I give up part of my practice? If this person's going to work for me anyway, why should I give them, sell them 30% of my practice? And I say, no, it's not about getting a smaller piece of the pie. The percentage may be smaller, the piece may be smaller, but we're going to get a bigger pie. There's going to be a synergistic relationship. The practice is going to grow. That associate turned partner is going to be more productive. They're going to watch the bottom line more. And so, done correctly, the pie grows. Maybe the percent of the piece of pie gets smaller, but ultimately your piece of the pie grows bigger because the pie is growing. And that's really the the optimism that we want to look at going into one of these relationships.
So I want to round back to something that you said, Lance, a little bit towards the beginning, where you said we really have 4 buckets. So let's go over those 4 buckets for the audience and listeners so that we can make sure that we hit onto all 4 of those. And that might help us kind of drill down on the pros and cons of each of the different options.
So there's really 4 big buckets that we can drop these practice transitions into, and think of it kind of like a grid, if you will. So we can sell to a private veterinarian or a group of private veterinarians, or we can sell to a private equity group, a corporate, if you will. Both of those, on the y-axis there, have 2 options. We can sell all of the practice, or we can sell a percentage of the practice. And so, to kind of summarize, we can sell a percentage of the practice to a private individual, or we can sell all of the practice to a private individual. We can sell part of the practice to a corporate group, and that's the same partnership that we were talking about above, but the corporates like to call it a joint venture or a JV. And so this is, kind of one of our, definitions, and they'll use the word JV instead of partnership. Or we can sell all of the practice to a corporate or private equity group. Now we do have to mention in kind of a smaller bucket, off to the side, we can talk about things like phantom equity or ESOPs, where we are I want to say giving, but we're as part of our team's compensation. We are giving out shares, or we're compensating them with shares for their efforts. And so that's kind of a smaller bucket that's off to the side, a 5th category, if you will.
Got it. So really the 4 buckets is all private, 1, bucket 2, all corporate or private equity, bucket 3, partial to private, and bucket 4, partial to corporate or private equity.
Exactly.
Okay. And within those 4, then I think, we've Bree has mentioned the benefit. You both have been talking about the benefit of the partnership. And so do you guys want to go through the pros and cons? We've talked about pros and cons a bit of partnerships. What do you think is the pros and cons of not partnership, but, full private or full corporate private equity?
Yeah, Bree, what questions do you have about a 100% sell to a private individual or a private group of veterinarians?
Gosh, that one seems like a pretty straightforward one to me. I think the benefit is that you don't have any continued responsibility, and you get all your money up front, so you don't have to worry about the practice losing value. And then let's say you sell 70% to someone, and over the years that 30% that's remaining becomes devalued because the practice isn't well managed. I hear a lot of times when there's a transition. And when I bought my practice 20 years ago, everybody basically quit within the first 6 months because my practice of medicine from San Francisco was really different from the way it was in the cabin where my hospital was at that time in Tahoe. It was really different. People were really freaked out by it. So the downside, I think, is that, or the upside is that you make all your money and you're in, you're out, you've got what you got, and you know what you have. You have a known entity and you're done.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add another upside as well. That's also the most traditional way that practices, have been sold over the last, multiple decades.
Yeah.
And so, 100% sell. That's what people are used to. When you list a practice with a broker, or you list a practice, on the, on a website, it's usually a 100%, practice acquisition / transaction. And that is what people are used to. And that's how practices normally have, been bought and sold. And that's also what a lot of banks are really more comfortable with financing. So, we can have a whole session on financing, on how to get paid. There are a few banks that will finance a partial sell, like we talked about earlier, they are comfortable financing that partial sell. Most banks are much more comfortable financing that 100% acquisition. So, you kind of fit into a mold. And sometimes when you fit into a mold, it makes things, easier to process and to effectuate.
And what are the downsides to selling 100% to a private entity or corporate?
Well, the biggest disadvantage that I can think of is just is the overall sales price. That's that big elephant in the room. How much cash are you going to get to cash out? And in today's market, most of the time, a private practice veterinarian just can't pay the same price, that a corporate practice could. And so that private practice veterinarian has to service the debt and pay the mortgage and pay the bills, with the profits of the practice. And for some reason, somehow those corporations can reach deeper in their pockets and make those payments and pay a lot more for the practice overall. So, that big disadvantage is you're probably going to get less with a private practice veterinarian. Now, having said that, some practices, and so solo doctor practices, smaller practices, generally less than $750,000. A corporate sale is really not in the cards. They kind of fly under the radar. They're not targets for the corporate practices, and so therefore they're not really an option anyway. So the sales price is going to be about the same.
Yeah, I guess I'll just throw in a bit of observed experience from a local hospital here that was sold twice with the owner financing to the buyer. They bankrupted out twice before they found a third purchaser over the years who was able to make it go.
Wow, that is scary.
Yeah.
That is scary. And that is one of the scary aspects of owner financing as well.
Yeah. It's a very scary downside, potential downside, not always bad. Downsides to selling completely to a corporate entity. We feel a little dirty.
Well, I'll be the first to say that. So I have sold practices to corporate, entities before, and I will be the first to say that I don't feel it's the best thing for veterinary medicine, as a whole. It is very good money in most cases, but personally, I didn't feel very good about it, after the end of it, and I'm not afraid to say that.
No, I'll tell you, I had a corporate consolidator contact me. This is how you and I met. Contacted me about a year and a half, 2 years ago after Bill's diagnosis, when I was like, shaking my hands in the air, not knowing what to do with my life. And that's the one thing that's why my practice isn't sold right now. I'd really like my beautiful small animal practice that I've carefully cultivated over the years and grown with a big chunk of my heart to go to somebody or a group of somebodies who are going to continue to grow and serve my community.
That's exactly right. So in you and most veterinarians have, huge hearts in that aspect. So you're thinking about your patients, you're thinking about your clients, you're thinking about the community that you're going to continue to live in, in the practice that you're going to probably, I'm putting words in your mouth here, continue to drive by every day. And you want to feel good about that, what you've done for the long term. At
some point, those of us that have sold or do sell to folks that turn out to be corporate consolidators, I get it. I get it. It's my practice. I did just over $1.2 million this year, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of sexy interest in it because I'm a solo practitioner. And so I understand, if you find somebody who's got the code to the door and you want to go through the door, I understand going through the door.
Yep, that's exactly where I was as well. So it was the best option for me at the time, and also the highest priced option for me at the time. That's a major disadvantage, that comes with the territory there.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's something to think about. When we hear, whether it's in Vets for Vets or just from other colleagues, there are colleagues where that might really be the only option because they don't have the option to continue working for one reason or another, or they absolutely need the cash influx for one reason or another, right? Bree, to your point about what's happened with Bill and the situation that you find yourself in, 3 years ago, if somebody would have told you this, you never would have believed it, right?
No, not for a second. This was not my plan.
Right.
It's not my plan.
Right. Well, and there's no indicators. There's nothing, right? Yeah. And that's
what happens when you follow Waze. When the traffic is bad and you follow Waze, this is what happens. Learn from my fail.
That's what happens in life. That's what we've seen with COVID, with so many other things. But we do also want to have compassion for colleagues that find themselves in a situation where a corporation or a private entity really is the best option because they absolutely need that money, right? And there's compassion for that situation as well. I mean, we joke that it might seem a little dirty, but it also might seem like they might be doing that with a heavy heart, right? And at least there is that option for them if that's something that they need. Lance, you said that there's also this sort of like side bucket. And I know that we've gone through kind of pros and cons of full 100% sale to a private, full 100% sale to a corporation or private entity, and then also the pros and cons of partials. What about the side bucket of phantom equity and ESOPs and giving out sharing, compensating shares? Can you dive into that a little bit?
Sure. But we actually need to back up a step and talk about the pros and cons of selling partially to a corporation.
Oh, right.
We haven't.
Oh, good. That's right. Yes, we do need to do that. Thank you.
This is a huge conversation right now on VIN. We're having a pretty spirited conversation about that.
Yeah, because it's very common. There's a spirited conversation on the boards, but it's also a very common model right now where a corporate will come in and they'll buy, anywhere from 51 to 90% of your practice, and you will become a partner with them. And again, it's called a joint venture. And that JV model, really, there's a couple of big things to point out there. Advantage wise, someone would say, well, why would I want to do that? I'm still going to be the person that's there at the practice. They're probably going to be relying on me to manage the practice. I'm probably going to be making the hiring and firing decisions. And yeah, that's all true. Those are all, you continue to do the same thing that you were doing in that full ownership position. And the reason for that is every one of these corporate groups, and I, in my mind, and I'm going to be, kind of a little bit, nasty here, but in my mind, they fall into two buckets. Those that tell you that they're going to sell or flip your practice, and the others that lie to you. That's the ultimate goal with most of these groups that are buying practices right now, is ultimately they're looking to aggregate practices. And that's really what we should be calling them, as practice aggregators. Aggregate practices and then ultimately sell that as a large group to another corporate aggregator. And it kind of becomes a game of hot potato, if you will. So people ask, well, why would I keep back 10, 20, 30, 49%? And the reason for that is when that group of practices, that corporate aggregator goes to flip and sell to that quote unquote bigger fish, that bigger corporate aggregator, the multiple that they get, the amount of of cash that they get for those practices goes up quite a bit. So, and put this in like real examples, you may sell a practice for, a 5 or a 6 or a 7 or an 8 multiple. Some, 10 is not unheard of to sell your practice to that corporate aggregator. When that corporate aggregator goes to turn and sell, then they will, a lot of times they will get 15, 16, 19, 20 plus times EBITDA. And that's going to be defined in a further podcast, times profitability. You can think of that. So basically your let's call it your 49% is worth almost as much as the 51% that you sold in the first sell. So some folks will refer to that as a waterfall or a second sell. But basically what it is you will have the opportunity in all likelihood to sell the percent that you keep back at a later date. In the gamble, the investment opportunity is it's going to be worth more on that second sell it is the first time. So to really maximize the value of your practice, that joint venture or that partnership model to a corporate is really probably the best way to maximize. Now, the downsides of this, Bree, I can see, I can hear the concern. Like, where's the downside if that's the upside is they're worth a lot more money. The downside is that's a bet. That's an investment opportunity. I mean, it's like when clients call me and say, hey, this is what's on my desk. What do you think about this investment opportunity? I say, well, it's a lot like, going to Vegas and Bree's not far down the road from Reno, going and putting, $1 million on red. It's a bet. It's an investment. And there's absolutely no no guarantee that that investment is going to work out. It depends on a lot of stuff, and those things are out of your control, like the market, the ability of that corporate group to manage their practices. Is there going to be a buyer that comes along? We can say historically that there has been, and historically those investments have performed very well. But in reality, we don't know what the future is going to hold, for those future sales. The second downside is also a pretty big one, and I also, alluded to it, is you are tied into that group. You're a partner, you're still an owner, and you're still going to be working at that practice for an undetermined number of years. And so for your purposes, Bree, to plan life,
right.
It's hard to plan life on when that second sell is going to happen. It could happen in 6 months. It could happen in 5 years, and you have zero control over that.
Right. And so during those years, I'm continuing to play my role as the lead of my team and making decisions for my team. Only somebody's telling me what to do.
Yeah, you have another level of complexity there, where you have someone that you have a partner that you're working with. You have probably a regional medical director that you're working with. You have a regional lead that you're working with. They have the ability, since they're a majority owner. And I've never seen one of these that wasn't a majority shell. I mean, they own the majority of the practice, so they have the say. They have say on pricing. They have say on hiring, firing decisions. They have say on whether or not you buy a new ultrasound or not. You are now in the passenger seat. You're not in the driver's seat.
And I understand.
And those are some of the.
I understand they have some pretty. They can have some pretty significant production requirements. Yeah.
Most of the time, veterinarians are paid on production when they work for these corporates. So the seller is paid on production, and a good percentage of them that I see are actually on straight production. So you have to work and you have to produce to get your normal salary.
Right.
So there are some distinct downsides. Now, for certain veterinarians, myself was one of them, that I was okay with that. I was at a point in my career where I could continue to do the things that I was doing. I can have this joint venture and hopefully have the upside of that ultimate, transaction, at the end of it. And many of my clients that I work with, they're at a point in their career where they don't have to sell wholly right now. They want to do the same things that you were talking about, Bree, is scaling back, having less management responsibility, having less financial responsibility. I can tell you, as a practice owner, one of the biggest, stressors that I had is hey, payroll comes every 2 weeks and you've got to make it, and everybody's got to get paid. Yeah. And instantly, that stressor went away from my life, that I did not have to worry about human resources. I did not have to worry about finance. I did not have to worry. And I have to worry about the performance of the practice ultimately, but not that day-to-day, writing of checks.
Yeah, that's a stressful feeling. It'd be nice to have that lifted off. But can we have everything and none of the bad stuff? Is there a scenario?
I wish the world worked that way, Bree.
Well, yeah, me too. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I feel like we need to cover what are we missing?
We haven't covered that fifth bucket, that fifth smaller bucket, and it is a very rare bucket, but it does exist, is that ESOP model. ESOP stands for Employee Stock Options Plan. And it is that those ESOPs are used extensively through other industries. And so large companies, small companies use an ESOP as a retention tool, if you will. So they start offering stock options to their employees in an attempt to retain good talent. And so that stock option can be seen as a gift. It can be seen as part of their compensation package. But those employees become true owners. The devil is really in the details here. There's a lot of details about, when is that stock option become vested? How is profitability dispersed out? What happens if that employee does want to leave? How are their shares bought back out of the company? How are the shares held? Are they held in a trust? Are they held, by the individual employee? The bottom line is these are incredibly complex models to set up, and so it takes a very specialized legal team to be able to set these up. They're regulated by this law called ERISA, the Employee Retirement Investment Security Act. And I don't want to bore you with that, but ERISA is a very onerous law. ERISA is a very highly regulated subject. So if you do set up an ESOP, you have to make sure that it's done correctly. And traditionally, too, not all of the company is given away in the ESOP. So, there's small percentages that are given. So, in a situation where, a veterinarian does want to retire and really step away in a fairly short order, it'll take years to effectuate that ESOP. And then also, too, they're going to continue to have to run the practice and manage the practice now just with less profits overall. But there are some practices that successfully set up ESOPs and they retain great employees and they do a great job, with the ESOPs. Typically, those are larger practices. We're talking, specialty centers, 50 to 100 employees, et cetera.
Yeah. A friend of mine owns a few hardware stores in our area, and she has an ESOP, and she's mostly out of ownership. She's got most of her employees her employees own the majority of her businesses. She's super happy with it, but it seemed so complicated, and it seemed like something that for me should have started 10 years ago.
It's a very complicated situation, and it's it does take years, to set up. But I will say that the vast majority of ESOPs are actually set up for retiring owners. Mm-hmm. And I say vast majority, 70-something% of ESOPs are put in place to allow that hardware store owner or that tech company owner or whoever it is to retire. Typically, they're used in heavy industry. There's a few big supermarkets, clothing manufacturers that are set up in ESOPs. And so it's a tool. It can be used, and you'll see it, as you research these things. And it's just not very common in veterinary medicine.
Okay. Jordan, I feel like we've covered a lot of the blue sky mapping options.
Yeah. We covered a lot, and, so grateful for both of your times. And I want to be respectful of both of your times, as well as, our listeners. We want to keep these not too long. And we want to hear your questions. We are collaborating with VIN, so we have message boards up to continue this conversation. You can also find in the episode notes additional links and helpful information. Lance or Bree, anything else you want to leave the audience with?
Well, Bree, I've got to give you some homework.
Oh God!
There you go. There you go.
Damn it!
I know you're a very busy person and a very tough person to deal with what you're going through. But I'm going to ask you to be thoughtful about what is it on a day-to-day basis that gives you that grind. What is it that's the problem thing? Is it that management? Is it the fact that your phone rings after hours? Really dive in on what is eating into your work-life balance that makes you, want to sell. And I think that's going to help drive, yours and hopefully the listeners' decision on how much of that practice, they sell. I can tell you that I was certainly in that situation where I just want out. I want 100% out. I don't want to deal with this. Another 3 to 5 years is just not going to work in my family and for my life. And ultimately, I made that work, but it was really me stopping and thinking, what is it that was the big problem? Once I had that support structure around me, the partnership wasn't near as bad. So that's your homework, is to really get granular on what is the problem.
Okay, and then I guess I'll give homework to all the rest of us that are listening. Let's jump on the message boards and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to have this conversation on the message boards.
If you guys, if you have something that you need to post anonymously, shoot it to me. My email address is...
You can email podcast@VIN Foundation.
Oh, perfect. That's even better. Less work for me.
And that'll be in the episode notes as well. One thing off your plate, Bree.
You always rock. Thank you. That is why you are the fuel to our fire. Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll mention too that you also have the ability to post anonymously on the regulatory and legal board as well. So I know it's not associated with it. Probably will be cross-posted with this podcast discussion, but we do get quite a few anonymous legal and regulatory things that needed to be discussed on that board.
Cool.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for your time and your expertise. And I just want to say to our listeners, you have great resources here in Dr. Bree Montana and Dr. Lance Roasa. So utilize this and email us, and we'll put a link for the collaboration with VIN. And you do not need to be a VIN member to access this message board link. You can just get VIN Foundation access, which is free to every veterinary colleague. All those links will be in our episode notes. Thanks so much, Bree and Lance. Take care, listeners.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for being here.
Always great to visit with you.
Yeah, excellent. See you guys soon.
Thanks,
Have
you too.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Veterinary Pulse. Please check the episode notes for additional information referenced in the podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow, subscribe, and share a review. We welcome feedback and hope you will tune in again. You can find out more about the VIN Foundation through our website, vinfoundation.org, and our social media channels. Thank you for being here. Be well.